Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Nurturing Astrology podcast. I'm Dominique Jaramillo, your astrologer and host. I believe astrology can fast-track personal growth, improve relationships, and empower parents. On this show, I will bring you practical guidance and insight from my own work, studies, and life experiences, as well as interview experts to bring you stellar wisdom from other teachers and professionals to inspire you on your journey. I'm so glad you're here and thanks for tuning in. So sit back, enjoy the show, and be sure to follow, like, and subscribe to catch every new episode as soon as it drops. Okay, let's dive into today's show. Hi, everyone. We're back with the Nurturing Astrology podcast, and I'm here with a special guest interview today, Annie Bertrand. Is that how you say your name?
Yeah.
Okay. So I am here with Annie Bertrand, and she is an ancestral astrologer and an energy healer. So welcome, Annie. I'm so excited to talk to you today and introduce you to the community.
Thank you so much, Dominique. I'm so excited to be here today. And hello, everybody.
Awesome. Okay, so it's Cancer season, and I wanted to do a chat about mother and the mother wound because you do a lot of work with healing ancestral karma and mostly with women, right? Do you work mostly with women and the mother wound?
I do, except when women send me their husbands because they're like, he needs to deal with his stuff. So I
I
do that
love
too.
that. I
Yeah.
love that. That's so great. You can't do it all for them, right?
No.
So before we dive in, I would love for you just to sort of introduce yourself a little bit and share a little bit about your journey to astrology and to this ancestral work and breaking and healing work. I'd love to kind of know a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, absolutely. They go together. So I'm
Okay.
an astrologer and energy healer, and I help self-aware moms to heal their generational trauma so that they can raise confident kids who won't need decades of therapy to heal from their own childhood. And I found my way to astrology when I was in the very thick of postpartum depression. I had been in therapy for a really long time. I was putting a lot of the pieces together about how my own childhood wounds were showing up, how my own mother wounds were showing up, and that was the main thing triggering me. But after a few months, I felt like I would just go to therapy and I was kind of feeling worse. I was like, great, here's another way my mom left a mark on me. See you next Friday. And I just felt like worse, you know? And so I was looking for different modalities and different things, and I kind of fell upon energy healing. And it honestly like changed my life because I was like, wow, like here I am talking about all the things that are happening, but we're actually going in and doing the work and releasing the emotions and rewiring our subconscious. And so I was walking out of there feeling a lot lighter and feeling a lot better. And then, so this was about 2019-ish around. And then 2020, obviously the world kind of like, it was a lot. And I was a mom of two young kids, and I was honestly kind of spiraling. I was like, oh my goodness, like what have I done bringing kids into this world? It's so unstable, yada, yada. So I turned to astrology for answers, and I got a reading done. And she said to me, she was like, you know, you're coming up on like a peak period. So you're going to meet a spiritual mentor of some sort, and it's going to really change your life, but it's also going to change your work. I was like, oh, okay, interesting. And so about a few months later, not even like a month maybe, I get invited to this Facebook group that someone was running a challenge and whatever. And it was all about energy healing and things like that. And so I did the challenge and I was like, oh my God, this like explains everything that I've ever felt about mental health, yada, yada. And I was like, I need to become trained in this modality. And so I did, and I did 3 years of training and hundreds of hours to, you know, practice and learn all the things around energy healing. Which brought me to 2023, and I was doing past life work and past life regressions, and I discovered that I had been an astrologer in previous lives. And I was like, oh my goodness, this makes so much sense. Like I've always loved astrology. I felt called to it. And so then a couple of weeks later, I had the download to kind of like bring the two together. So for me, it's like astrology is that healing map, and it's why soul chose all the things. And then I use that map as the springboard to do the healing a lot more quickly, and kind of proactively rather than you're waiting in the thick of it like I was with postpartum depression. So I'm very big on like proactive healing rather than waiting for that to have like stirred up all the stuff and then you have no choice but to deal, right? So
Ugh.
that's how I ended up here.
Oh, I love that. You know what? It's so fascinating because I always say like I really feel like astrology is a fast track for therapy because it's true. I'm an advocate of talk therapy, but where do you go? I mean, like it's true. They're not really allowed to give you advice. There's a lot of questions and you leave kind of feeling still heavy and all of these things and you're just these modalities give us a way in and actually you've created ways to help people actually heal and lighten and release, right? So fascinating stuff too. So I want to go into a couple of things here. I want to definitely talk about the astrology and the healing modality that you use. So we're in Cancer season. It's the mother, and the home and family and nurturing our family and ourselves. So I thought it was a really good time to talk about the mother wound, which is something you talk about and work with a lot of mothers on. I'd love to go into a little bit about what you feel like. What is the mother wound to you? And how do you work with that? How do you feel about the word wounding and the mother wound? And how do you begin working with your clients around that without making them feel like, there's something wrong with them or I have to be fixed, but working with the wound is what I call it.
Yeah, I love that. So the way that I always look at it is really, and again, because I have an energy healing background first, right? So I always look at things from a karmic point of view. And when I say karmic and karma, I don't mean like when, the pop karma of like you did this in a past life and now you're being punished for that.
Okay.
No, it's really just more that my belief systems and what has been talked about in many books and everything is that before we incarnate, soul makes a plan, right? It's like our higher self is like, I'm incarnating for this reason and to experience this whole thing, right? And
Right.
so that's kind of how I see challenges and woundings and things like that. It's that those are those key moments that bring us on the path. So the way that I always look when I look at a chart is I always start with the north node of like, this is the destiny path, this is where soul wants to go. The rest of the planets, they're the tools to make this happen, as well as the challenges and the limitations that the quote unquote, those woundings, those hardships, because they propel you to go forward and do that. So to give you an
Yes.
example, like I have a Capricorn moon. My mom was always very hard on me, very judgmental. It was like not nurturing at all. And it left me very kind of wounded before I realized all the connection. But when I realized all the connection, I was like, oh, this makes so much sense to kind of like toughen me up in a way that I'm like, I can put myself out there because haters online can't say anything worse than my mother ever did. You know what I mean? It was like preparation, it was like boot camp. That's kind of the way I see it. Like I always come back to be like, okay, yes, this was really challenging and it was hard, but what was it in the bigger picture of things? Like why did it serve you in a way? Because it always does. And so that's kind of how
Absolutely.
I see it with wounding and how it's like, yeah, we're not ever broken or needing to be fixed. It was a conscious soul choice to
Yes.
experience that. And I know that's hard sometimes for people because they think that like why would I ever choose this type of suffering and all that. And I fully understand that. And it's really not about putting blame on anyone or anything. But for me, I found it very empowering to realize, like another example, when I had really bad postpartum depression, it was right during my Saturn return. I basically blew up my whole life. I like left my job in pharmaceutical marketing because I was no longer like in alignment. And of course, it was like super hard at the time. And the postpartum depression was really, really bad and like left, long lasting implications. I do recognize that. But at the same time, I can be grateful to know that it put me on the right path of my soul purpose. Because if had that not happened, like I would
Right.
probably still be just kind of going through the motions, very like zombie like, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. That makes total sense. I love the way you're putting it, the perspective of our chart. I do totally agree with that we do make that soul contract. We come in and Saturn shows us these are the lessons you're here to learn. A North Node shows us this is ultimately where you want to go. And like I was telling you, my original business was like duality and beyond. So it's like the South Node or like that other side of duality. It's not to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but to learn to integrate the wisdom you came in with and
Yeah.
then where that's supposed to take you. And do you believe also that the journey is to that North Node or to that sun, that becoming? Because I know some people in, certain um types of astrology, like the North Node is like the head of the dragon, the things you're eating, and like it's not, and the tail of the dragon. So they have different perspectives of that. But I'm a little bit more aligned with what you're saying in terms of that's where we're ultimately the destined path if we choose it, right? If we choose it. And I think that astrology is a way of really helping us see that we did choose this path for a reason. Even these challenges, these lessons, right?
Yeah.
Around our self-worth and our capabilities. Saturn was your moon sign. So you can look to your Saturn and how those imprints came in about confidence and self-worth and stepping up and being able to manage the haters online or whatever, right? So seeing the
Mm,
blessing in those things takes work and perspective when you say like to be willing to reflect and try and see the higher purpose of something that was challenging. And people who've had a lot of trauma, like hard trauma, I imagine that's where your energy work could come in too, and helping them navigate that trauma, because you're like, why would I choose to have this kind of trauma in my life? Why would I
mm,
choose to be treated this way, or those kinds of things? And it's like, wow, your soul was like ready to take something serious on, and that
mm,
there's power in that. But I would imagine that your energy work is where you could probably bring that in and really help them. So,
mhm.
can you share a little bit more about the other side of the coin, and then we'll integrate them?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's it. It's so, energy healing is really, it's a combination. So the modality that I've been training is called the decodes modality. And my teacher, she basically channeled that years and years ago. And I just like love her to bits because she's also trained as a naturopath. And so she combines really both. Like it's very grounded. It's like woo, but it's also very grounded in the
Love,
body.
okay.
Because this is the thing, is like the reason that we need energy work is because our emotions and our memories, they kind of get trapped in our body. And what happens is that they'll kind of find like this like organs that have like resonances. So for example, a lot of people know this, like the liver, for example, is very prone to anger. So when we have a lot of repressed anger, it tends to hang out in our liver, and then it causes physical problems because your body has to like readjust to this thing. Same thing with autoimmune diseases. People, the allopathic system will say, well, your body's attacking itself and we don't know why. I'm like, well, no, we know why. We actually do know why from an energy perspective. It's attacking all of these emotions that and this baggage that it knows isn't supposed to be there, but it's actually in your organs and in your fascia. So your body's not attacking itself. It's trying to show you where there's stuff that's not supposed to be. So with energy healing, we can basically pull these emotions out of the body and release them to have, that's it, more flow and ease. And we also go and actually rewire the brain and the subconscious. I use a lot of like neurolinguistic programming, as well as working with Akashic records, which the Akashic records, people might not know, is it's all these memories from this life and from past lives. And these things still kind of happen. The way that I like to describe my work is, I want you to think of like the brain as like a directory, okay? So it's like human brain likes to be efficient, and they like to look at patterns and recognize patterns. And so what happens is when you have a really marking memory or a moment, basically the brain makes like an entry on, okay? And it says like, okay, this is what happened, these are the emotions, this is how we acted. And so when you're living that, and this could be like 10 years ago, it could be 2 weeks ago, like it just whatever. And so then what happens now when you're in the moment and you're living something, and then your brain is kind of always scanning your directory to know how to react and to do it more efficiently. And then it goes, oh, this is very similar. This has the same kind of feel, or it kind of happened. So great, I'm just going to plug this in and act that way. So that's where we see where we start acting from our subconscious mind, and we're not really aware. And it might not have been the same situation, but they're just close enough. So the work that I do is to really go into that directory and kind of undo it and erase those programmings that don't serve you, because most of the time they are traumatic moments, or they are moments that that don't have our highest like self. And so with that's energy healing modality that I have, it really combines like neurolinguistic programming with the emotional work and the family and everything, is we kind of unprogram your directory from things that don't happen or don't serve you, I mean, so that you can kind of show up how you really want to and not keep showing up from that trauma point.
Ooh, okay. Okay, so can you give me a quick example of how you do that with someone?
Hmm. Yeah, so typically, I mean, it depends. Like sometimes it can be kind of like a one session and it's just like over and done with. And then other times it's like a longer thing if it's been kind of like more progressed. But typically
Right.
what I always start. So also like full disclosure, I'm like a medical medium. Basically, one of my biggest gifts is that I can feel
Ooh,
things from other people's bodies.
okay.
I'm very much of that empath, but I didn't realize it then. But now I know that it's that. So I don't feel everybody's stuff unless I actually tune in. So the first thing that I do is I
Fascinating.
tune in to the person's body. And so I'm like, oh, how long have you been having this like neck pain? Or like, tell me about your left hip. And they're like, yeah. And so then we go and I'm like, okay, well, what is your body showing us? And then I have other, intuitive tools that I use. And then I'm like, okay, well, this hip pain, it's showing me that, I don't know, you're holding on to like this shame or whatever. And then it's like, again, intuitively, and I also like channel a lot, very like claircognizant. And so then I'm like, okay, well, why is your mom coming up? Like, what, tell me what comes to mind when I tell you about, the shame being related to like your mom, right? And then we do that. Or sometimes we'll go into the person's Akashic records and then we go together to kind of see the moment, So I'll be like, okay, this is related to your mom. I'm feeling maybe it was around age 8. Okay, great, let's go. And then I'll get visions. And then I'll be like, okay, well, this is kind of what I'm seeing. And so we kind of get to the
Mhm.
story of it. And then, yeah, we release all of the emotions to take out that charge. And then we do the neurolinguistic programming to rewire the brain's patterns. And yeah, I guess that's kind of it.
Wow. Okay, so you said you look at the chart first. So,
Mhm.
P.S., the fact that you said hip, I was like, is she tuning into me right now? My
Possibly.
right, it's my right hip, but not my, but so side note, but no, how do you then use the astrology? So you said you looked at that first. So
Mhm.
do you tune like what kinds of things can affirm what you're getting from one side or the other? Does that make sense? What I'm asking?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that's it. Typically, I mean, it kind of depends. If someone is coming for like an acute kind of situation, then typically I'll go in with like my body first and then they'll say something. Most of the time it's if they're like, "Oh, I've always felt like this and, I was never accepted or whatever." And then they look and I'm like, "Well, yeah, no kidding. You have your IC in Aquarius. Like, of course you're the black sheep of the family. They won't
Yeah.
accept it. You just gotta you gotta like that's step one
Or
is you gotta
Aquarius sun in general. You just don't
that's it,
fit.
right? Exactly.
Mhm. Yeah.
So there's that way that I do it. But then if it's more of a long term, like people are just like, I'm lacking willpower. I feel like I don't know who I am. Like more of like their whole life is just kind of like meh. Then I start with the chart and that's it. And we map out just kind of like the biggest challenges of their lives. I look at like, yeah, their Chiron, I look at their north node, I look at their moon for the mother wound, I look at Saturn for the father wound, and we
Yeah.
really map out all of that stuff. And I start asking questions to be like, well, is this playing out in your life right now? So say for
Mhm.
example, like if someone has their Chiron in like Taurus, and that's it, they feel like they don't have a lot of like nervous system safety. They're like, every time I go to spend money, I'm at the store, I feel like I can't breathe, and then it's like, okay, well, so those money like scarcity wounds and that story that started off in a previous life and in childhood, that is still playing out in this life now, right? So that's kind of
Mhm.
how I do it. And it's like, it just really is like a springboard for people to start putting the dots together of how these things are still playing out in their lifetime, and it just gets there like a lot quicker. It's really great with husbands, like I was saying, when wives sends me their husbands, because a lot of time, their husbands might have a bit more resistance, or they are just kind of like, I believe it, but kind of like, okay, like I'm here because
Mhm.
my wife made me, and then I like read them like a book with their chart and they're like, oh. And so it kind of really
Mhm.
helps to like break those walls down and establish
Yeah.
that trust more quickly, and they're like, okay, this one knows what she's talking about. So
Honestly, I think that's what happened with my own husband. I mean, when I
yeah.
started dating him and he was into this and I was telling him about himself, he was like, on the one hand, how could you know this about me? And then the other hand, like, how could you see me? So then there was this idea of, well, I'm not gonna be able to get away with anything with this one, but also like there's a comfort in I'm being seen without having to do much. And that opens it up. I do think there's something to that, and feeling like safe then to be vulnerable, to know that you're really seen and understood, and that can really open up a marriage, in such a beautiful way, to hold each other, to respect each other's differences. And I can only imagine, I love that men come to you that they're willing to, and they must really love their wives that they're actually there saying, okay, I'll try this. So I think that's a win right there for sure. So I do love that you bring in that other piece, and that it's not on the wife or the mother, the mom, to do it all, or like to heal the family, like to really get that partner in. So I know there's a lot of women and wives who are into astrology, but their husbands or spouses are not. Or even when you're co-parenting, I think that there's a fascinating way to understand your co-parent in a way that can help you better co-parent in a respectful, way. So I do love that the women sending you their husbands, and that they're open to it. That's helpful to me. You know what I mean? For sure. For sure.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's when like when I always say to clients, will always ask me this, and they're like, how do I get my husband to like get there? You know, how do I get him to heal and do his work too? And I always say that the easiest way, the only kind of effective way, is for you to lead by example. And I know it sounds so cheesy, and you're
No,
like,
it's
come
true.
on, Annie, tell me something more. But that really is. It's like when you start doing the work and they start seeing you changing. Like that's what unclicked for my spouse, and he saw me go from such reactive parenting, from absolutely feeling like I made a mistake to become a mom, and to like regretting it, to just no longer feeling that way, right? And no longer being
Yes.
so reactive, and really changing just, yeah, who I was and my reactions overall. And that's it. That's what I mean when I say like be the example and lead that by example in that way, because that's it. When they start seeing you change, and then they're like, oh, and then that also creates this energetic principle that we call, where it's like the gap grows. And typically what happens in relationships when that gap is, so you start healing and you're advancing, right? Your vibration is like raising, your baggage is going away. And so it starts creating a gap from where you were and where your spouse still is. And so this gap does two things. It either basically kind of activates the other person to catch up and want to meet you, or it activates the timeline of the they won't, and then the gap gets further and further and further. And then that's when people have to realize that, okay, well, this person isn't willing to, and then you have to make
Yes.
decisions about your relationships, right? But it really
Yes.
becomes an invitation, and you'd be surprised how many, men really do step up to that invitation when it comes from that place of just showing it, and not from that pressure of like, you got to deal with your childhood stuff. And
Yes.
there's no judgment. I was there for a really long time, because that's what therapy gave me. It gave me so much awareness. And so it was like, I see you there reacting from your childhood things, deal with that. But
Yeah.
that doesn't work.
Yeah. Oh, yes, that's so good. Oh my gosh, there's so many things you lit up in there when I was listening to you. I totally agree. I'm always about setting the example. It's, they say cliche, but it's true. You do set the example. And I was always that way in my marriage. It's like we have to grow together and at your own pace. Like everybody grows at their own pace. And but it's who I am. I know I am, and I do try. I don't like, oh, I'm leading by example, but I'm doing my work, and there is that space, and it does trigger. And like you said, an invitation for them, and you can have those comfortable conversations. When I'll see my husband react really strongly and I know that the reaction doesn't really match the situation, that's coming from something else, and you have to look at that. And so can being able to have those conversations in a gentle and nurturing way that allows them the opportunity to meet you, because all couples, they grow together, right? Even if it's at different paces, but if they're going in the same direction, that and they're choosing each other and want to be there, you can make it. But as
Yeah.
soon as they start diverting, and one's, like you said, doing the work and the other one just is resisting or won't, that's unfortunately when you do have see breakups, or people just aren't meant to stay on the same path, or they're just not gonna. um so I do love that you're also looking at, waking that up and leading by example, right? We have to do our work. And you mentioned this earlier, which I want to touch on too, when we get to the healing of our ancestral lines and our family wounds, that doing our work can have that ripple effect. And so I'd love to go into that a little bit. And also, do you feel like it's natural that, I guess, everybody has sort of like the moon is our maybe mother wounding or imprint, and the Saturn is our father and father imprint. But do you sense that a lot of times, how women will say they'll marry their fathers and men marry their mothers, or not, or the opposite, that sometimes that the mother wound is really more important for the husband or for the man, and the father with the woman, in terms of creating sort of energetic balance, energy? Like, how do you relate those? Are they equal? Would you say that the men lean towards that mother wound in terms of how they are in relationships, and the opposite, or just in life?
hmm Yeah, I mean, I definitely can see how our parenting imprints will show up in the relationships that we choose 100%. And I do see that in my clients all the time. And it's so interesting because when I do family readings where I'm looking at the parents and the kids like all together, that's where you start seeing a lot of overlap in signs and things like that. Like to give you an example, so I said I'm a Capricorn moon. So my dad is a Capricorn sun. My husband is a Capricorn sun. My son is a Capricorn rising. So we have a lot of that Capricorn story on our ancestral line, right?
Yes.
Can definitely, yeah, agree with that, and I can see that. I think that I wouldn't, from what I've seen in my practice, I wouldn't say that it would be like, oh, to one gender more specifically, like, oh, the mother wound and the father, or
Mhm.
whatever. I think it really depends on the overall kind of story and the overall karma that you decided, right? So sometimes, and this is what I see again in my family readings with kids, like there'll be like one kid who kind of has, typically they have the same IC as one of their parents. And for me, the IC, I always take it again from that family karma perspective, right? Is that that's the soul contract that you signed up to break and heal in your family line. And so
The
typically
ascendant, the
the,
ascendant is
the IC at the
the
start of the,
IC.
yeah, the
Oh, that
IC.
makes sense. Okay, the
Yeah,
IC.
yeah, the IC. And so
Ooh,
basically, what you'll see is like you'll have like maybe like the first child will have their IC, and it's like the same kind of energy as their mom's moon, or like her IC, or her rising, like whatever it is. There's an overlap there. And then you'll see the
okay.
second child, they have an overlap with their father. And so it's really interesting to see that. So I think it
Yeah.
just depends on the individual and their soul journey. And that's it. If they're showing up more for the mother line, if they're showing up more for the father line, if it's kind of like both, like for me, my story was very much with my mother line. And that was very much what like my Akashic story is, what I incarnated for. It was to liberate her line. And I see a lot of that in my chart. Like my chart ruler is in Cancer, it's Jupiter, it's in Cancer. My Chiron is in Cancer. So it's like, and again, my moon placement was very challenging with my mom. So there's like multiple things that kind of point to that overall
Yes.
story. And that's it. It just, I know that confirmation, A, from my chart, but also from going into my Akashic records and talking to my higher self and figuring out what I incarnated to do, and it was to liberate my mother line. So, yeah.
And then to obviously help other people do
Yes.
that, right? And
Yeah.
that to me is again like always validating the wisdom in the chart, and the guidance that that map really is so fascinating, because yeah, it's going to depend. You can see the connections between that moon and the challenging aspects, or where that is, where the line, where the story is going, right? And what that's about.
Yeah.
Um, and you have an interesting way of kind of giving people an easy way in through the elements in
Yeah.
terms of what their potential karmic stories could be. So I thought
Mhm.
that might be fun to share for people, because I know they're gonna be like, how can I look at my chart? What is it? Mean, do they look at the sign on the fourth, and then if that's what element that's in, and get an idea? But give us a little bit, give us a little intake in terms of like that easy way in terms of maybe the elements or something, or one place they could look to get started.
Yeah. Well, so that's, yeah, the elements I think is one of the easiest ways to start. And I always look at, so again, when I'm doing those family readings, I'm looking at the elemental dominance of every person's chart. And because that just gives us so much about their natural inclination. And
Mhm.
so it's just, yeah, it's just like a very general way, but there's so much wisdom there. And I always find that I can see children will incarnate into kind of like what their families needed. So to give you an
Mhm.
example, let's say you have an earth heavy family, and so they typically have, kind of keep it all together. Their emotions are repressed. It's very much focused on like working and being productive, and that story, right? And so then you'll have a child who will incarnate who is just like all water, like 100% water, super sensitive, super psychic, like super tuned into everything. And it kind of forces the family to like, you
Yeah.
can't be repressing the emotions with this type of child, right? So that's what I look at. It's just kind of like, okay, well, and that's a way again to see it and to shift that perspective, where it can be really challenging when your kids are very different than you are, to look at it as like, okay, well, what is this medicine that our family needed, right? Like, why was this a conscious soul choice? So, to give your audience like a little bit of like nuggets. So when people have really strong fire energy, typically they're here to show us to be like passionate, to not like dim their light, right? To follow what lights them up. And so typically those kids, those individuals will incarnate into families where it was a lot more of like honor, and this is what you should do, and this is what's expected of you, right? Or like, or you gotta tone it down, like this isn't proper, right? Things like that. So that's where it becomes like,
Yeah.
again, medicine that the family line needed. And then
Yes.
we have earth sign like people, they're typically much like, they're very like grounded, they take their time, they want to like plan things, they want to kind of analyze everything, right, and do things sort of like properly. And so typically they will incarnate into family lines where there's just like a lot of big ideas, but people just leave their dreams behind, they don't actually make them happen, they're very kind of like, yeah, just like ungrounded, right, or maybe just very chaotic. So they need that like solid presence, right? And then
Hmm.
we have air signs. So typically those people are big thinkers, big dreamers, have a lot of ideas. They want to communicate. They want to like do all the things. And so that they'll kind of the flip side of like the earth energy, for example, they'll incarnate to family lines who that's it, maybe abandoned their dreams, who self-abandoned, who didn't follow those things, right? And that's exactly what, or very like dogmatic or religious, or where it's like belief systems are very, structured
Mhm.
and rigid, and they have a whole new way of seeing things, right? And kind of like break that up.
Yeah.
And then water signs, that's it. They're the big feelers, the intuitives. And so they typically will incarnate into families where there's a lot of emotional repression, where that's it, the emotions didn't have a place to land.
Mhm.
And that's what I was saying, that you really don't have a choice when that's when that's what the child is like. So I think that's one of the easiest ways to look at it. And that's, you don't have to be fully versed in all the planets. You really just look at like, oh wow, okay, I have 12 planets in a fire sign. You have a lot of fire, right? And so
Right.
look at it from like, yeah, what is this medicine, and to also see it as that's your child's like strengths. Like this is what was super challenging for me with my own kids, and they started kind of coming into like their personalities. They have a lot of fire. They're very like strong minded, and it's like it can be frustrating at times because I'm like, just do what you're told, like just do it. And then I have to like remind myself, I'm like, I'm raising little leaders. The world needs more leaders. And I
Yes.
want to see it and take it as an invitation to reframe that the things that are really challenging for me right now, A, they're medicine that my family needs, and B, they're actually those soul strengths that they're going to need for their soul purpose. So,
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the things we always, whenever I work with parents, if they are struggling in that way, especially with a child that's super persistent or really passionate, has a lot of that fire, and it doesn't work for them, it's the opposite, is giving those gifts and realizing what you do now, that's really great energy, and those are going to be gifts. So we really do have to adjust in order to nurture that. And then
mm,
also you said you have fire in your chart too. So our kids also kind of mirror things as well, where we connect as well, right? So there's a part of you where you were always being told, maybe as a fire sign, to like tone it down. And
yep.
so it's like, hey, remember, like play, do you. And so it's also liberating you to do you by
Yeah,
having kids that
exactly.
remind you of your true path as an Aries sun, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
they are our helpers in that way too, and our best teachers, as well as showing us the opposite.
yeah, exactly. I'm glad you brought that up. I always say like the child that triggers you the most is like, yeah, your little mirror, like medicine. Like for me, that's my daughter. She's a Sagittarius sun. She's an Aries moon. She's a Pisces rising. I would say I'm like, it's all fire and emotion. There's zero chill in her chart. And that's exactly it. Like she just shows up loud and passionate. And it's like, that's what it made me realize. I was like, oh my goodness, I still have a lot of this childhood conditioning of like dim it down. Like I remember when, um, I was a kid and I would have girlfriends over and we would just like laugh and my mom would be like, tone it down and like be quiet. And like we weren't really doing anything. We were just like laughing. And I do recognize that now. I'm like, again, my daughter and that squeaky high pitchness, I get it. My mom's nervous system was probably just not where I needed to be. But it's like I realized that's it. With my daughter showing up in all this like passion and loudness and kind of being unfiltered, it was like my nervous system and my subconscious was screaming danger because it's like it's
Yeah.
not safe to be this much, right? And be too much and to yourself. So
Mhm.
she's constantly an invitation for me to look at my own stuff. And that's what you're saying when we first
Yeah.
started, right? It's really an invitation to heal yourself, right? So that's what I always say to people. It's like your child that's triggering you the most is probably showing you things that you still have to
Mhm.
heal because they're probably just the exact same way as you are. They're like mini you. And so they're showing you all the
Yeah.
ways that you've internalized that it's not safe to be who you are.
Yes. Yes. And our mothers, I mean, when we become parents, we automatically become more understanding and compassionate for our mothers once
Mhm.
we've become mothers because we realize those things, right? So getting back to Cancer season and the mother and motherhood, um, what kind of wisdom do you like to support your community and your clients with, or an invitation for the season we're in terms of nurturing our mother wound or looking to Cancer in the chart or the fourth house? Are there places like where you could give them a little bit of inspiration for how to use the energy that we're in right now in Cancer season in terms of this mother archetype and mother wound that we all carry, which I think is PS always triggered as a mother. Like you're always working with that wound, whether you realize it or not, as a mom, right?
Yeah, yeah,
We want to
absolutely.
emulate or we want to do the opposite, or but doing that for ourselves. So how do you place that with the Cancer piece?
Yeah. So I think it can kind of go like maybe like one of two ways. It's like either if you're kind of at the beginning of this like journey of that, like, yeah, healing and motherhood has broken it like wide open for you, then it's I want to say like look to your original like moon sign and your children's moon signs as well, and to
Hmm.
see what's that story there and how that's it, you're doing things differently and where those woundingers and those triggers are maybe like showing up in your day-to-day life, right? And with your
Right.
children. But then if you've kind of already been in the space and you've done like some work and you feel like you have a good foundation on that, then I would look more to, okay, well, where does Cancer rule in your chart? Because this is going to be an invitation right now with the transits and the planets there to kind of show you where maybe you can nurture yourself more, right? And I think that's also kind of what an invitation that I want to make is that, yes, it's like there's a lot of healing to be done and things to kind of clear and change about ourselves, but also just like nurturing yourself and doing things for yourself that really uplift you, that are like, yeah, supportive rather than like
Yeah.
fixing. Do you know what I mean? Like that's just like
Yes.
that nuance of helping and like nurturing yourself. And I think that that's for me, and I think my probably a lot of moms feel this as well. It's like I think Cancer season can be an invitation to look at like how do I nurture myself as much as I nurture others? Because I know
Yes.
that that's something really big, right? We're nurturing our families and our friends, and we're showing up in
Hmm.
work and all these things. And then it's easy to kind of have us like fall behind. So that's something that I do see now that you asked this question. I'm like, oh, I do see like
Hmm.
a bit of an increase of just moms at this time of year that they're like there's like that resentment and that like everyone is before me and I'm kind of like leaving it myself behind, and when is there ever time for me, and like who am I outside of all of this? And that is very, yeah, that Cancer invitation to look at like, are you nurturing yourself as much as you're nurturing others?
Absolutely. I know that the blessing of Jupiter in Cancer over the course of the next year is definitely anything it focuses on, it makes bigger, right? Whether it's beautiful blessings or its triggers. And
Mhm.
with Saturn squaring that right now, and it's eventually going to oppose that Chiron, like and it's squaring Chiron actually too, right? So there is that, I think, trigger that's going to come up to make you question and be like, yeah, my cup is not full. I am depleted. I am not taking care of myself. I'm doing everything for my family. Everything's out of balance. Where can I and how can I prioritize myself? And again, remembering coming back to this idea of when we do take care of ourselves first, putting the mask on first, right? And we do our own work, we are actually helping our family more.
Mhm.
It's a win-win. I like to create win-wins with my Libra moon in the fourth. So it's like, how can we find some win-wins here?
Yeah.
Whether it's going to our corners and having our alone time, or whether it's coming together in a really lovely way to support each other and learn and grow together. But I do feel like that energy is going to be challenging for many with Saturn, with the Saturn square in Aries and Chiron in Aries. I mean, it's, you know what? Like,
Yeah.
I need to like, wait a minute, where am I in this equation? And how much of that balance? And even in relationships with our partners, it's again like you're doing everything. Is it too much? Have you left yourself behind? And, or, you've put your other ambitions and things on hold in your life, right? And your family's good and they don't need you as much and you need to let go. And that's hard. I feel like parenting is a process of letting go. The more they're
Mhm.
able to be free, you really need to let them, right? So for a lot of moms, they might be at a time in their life where it's like, got to let go and give the kids some space to really find themselves and go on their own journey. And you figure out who the heck you are now. That's
Mhm.
my thing. It's like if you're doing your work and you're taking care of yourself on the journey, then when your kids don't need you anymore, you'll still know who you are. You'll still have you instead of being completely like, who the hell am I now? I'm not
Mhm.
the mother, and I what's my job? What's my role? Who am I? So it's really now there's an invitation to figure out who exactly you are now, wherever you are on your path, and to nurture, what might be missing for you, what you might be really craving and yearning for that's not really full, you
Yeah.
know?
You said that and it made me think of the like empty nest syndrome. I think it's
Yes.
exactly that. It's when the women have been abandoning themselves for so long and their full identity is on nurturing their children and going all in, that then of course once they leave the nest, you're like, oh my God, I'm left with quote unquote like nothing, because that's it. It's just been
Right.
years and years of self-abandonment. Yeah.
And you're not preparing your children for life if you're doing everything for them. And
Mm,
there's that, oh, I wanted, especially if you struggled and your wounds around not having that day-to-day, everyday connection and support, you're giving your kid everything and now they don't know how to do anything for themselves, or they just expect things that they're not going to get when they get out there in the world.
mhm,
So that's again, I think awareness is key, and understanding that you, by taking care of yourself and making yourself a priority, you're you're showing your child how to do that too, and
mhm,
helping them learn how to take care of themselves as well, and give them the tools to navigate life when you're not there to do everything.
mhm,
And so I think that's tough for moms. It really is. And I think getting back to the mother wound, it has a lot to do with your parenting style. You even say that you can look at, we know we can see our parenting styles based on our moon sign. I mean, I am a Libra moon. My mother was very accommodating. I try to be very accommodating and
mhm,
fair, right? I
mhm,
also need to like not be giving all the time and making every decision for the other person and what they need, and forgetting what I need.
mhm.
And
Yeah.
then feeling guilty that I've made myself a priority. That's another mom guilt thing, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
So
Uh, you made me
yeah,
think of like, a really interesting point, that why I think children's astrology is so important, because you were saying how you might want to, if you like, for example, if you weren't very nurtured, you're like, I don't want to do that the same way. I'm gonna like very much nurture my kids, right, and do it differently. But that still comes from leading from your own kind
yes,
of own wounds, right? And so that was a big thing for me. Like I didn't have any space to share any emotions or anything like that. It just like we didn't talk about those things. It was just I've had to deal with it all on my own. So of course I want to be very emotionally nurturing to my kids, because that's what I didn't have. And so I think that's what I needed and was missing. So I'm like, great, let me give that to my kids. But my kids both have Aries moons. They need to let it out first. They don't want to talk about their feelings. They want to scream and they want to punch pillows and they just want to be mad. And it only lasts like 2 minutes, thank God.
exactly.
Right? It's like quick. But it was such a like realization for me that I was like, oh my goodness, here I was thinking that I'm doing this great thing. And it's like, well, I didn't have that. And it affected me so much that I'm going to do it differently. But it wasn't actually what my kids needed. It's not what they need. They need
Yes.
the space to know that their big emotions are safe, that they're not too much, that they can discharge them. And then afterwards, we could talk about our feelings. But I was trying to like, oh, you're feeling, tell me how you're feeling. And they're like, "Ah," you know? So,
That's true. And I'll ask that when I'm working with a mom. I'll ask them, so either I'm trying to do this, I want to do that, I'm doing this for them, that I say, okay, why are you doing that? Well, because that's what I wanted, or I didn't have, and they come back to
yeah,
themselves. I'm like, but let's look at their chart. Let's look at them. This is
yeah,
not what they need. And so that's where we can know the differences, knowing the differences and how to adjust. That's the key in relationships. And the beauty of
yeah,
astrology is knowing your
mhm,
differences, you can adjust,
yeah,
and it makes it all the difference in the world. That's why I say astrology can like save relationships, marriages. It can do that, because
yeah,
that awareness and that awakening goes, oh, I don't need to work so hard. I need to let them let it out, and then if they need to talk about it, great. They might not need to, right? So I do think you're absolutely right there, and that's a good reminder for all parents who are struggling is, are you operating from your own moon, and your own needs, or are you really, seeing what your child needs and trying to provide that and making the adjustments you need to within yourself to be able to provide that? Because it might not be easy. If you're a watery mom and you've got fire kids, you're just like, I need peace and quiet, or so does dad have that connection? Okay, take them, go to the park, do something, let me
mhm,
have my downtime and fill my own cup so I can be present for everybody. So I love that family. That's the beauty of family dynamic readings. And that's the other thing I was going to ask you, because I know there's a lot of astrologers who don't like to do child readings, don't like to look at kids' charts, and there are those concerns about projection and all that kind of thing. So how do you approach looking at a child's chart for a family, and where do you, keep that safe line? Um, I have some ideas where you probably do it, but I would love for you to share.
yeah. I have actually been just last week. I was seeing all that on Threads, and I was like, oh, interesting. I was like, I hadn't even really like thought of that. So again, I think it's very different for me because I have that energy healing background first, and
Mhm.
I'm very always talking about, with my clients about pulling our projections back and quite literally like taking them off of people and reeling them back in, and again,
Mhm.
just always bringing it back to like, well, no, this is serving a purpose for your kids, right? But really, the way that I see it is like, it's kind of like a compass, and this is how I teach it in my course, is that we are not like, and again, I think that's where the awareness helps. Like if you see your kid's Chiron and you see their Saturn and their Pluto and you see the hardships, and it's not about stopping them or kind of like like intervening in the divine plan or anything like that, but it's just about having the awareness so that you can know, well, this is really out of my realm, like let me pull in external resources, whether that's it be therapy or parenting coach or whatever it is, right? Like where you
Right.
need resources to pull in. And it also, I find that it gives you, yeah, again, it's just like it's a compass, it's an overall bigger picture. Like I had a client the other day, she was messaging me about, she's like, I'm kind of stuck because she's like, my kid committed to doing this like sports thing for the summer. Now he doesn't want to go anymore. And she's like, I'm kind of in between the two. Like, do I force him and do I kind of say you got to follow through on your commitments because that is a
Mhm.
value that they value as a family? Totally fair. She's like, or do I kind of like respect, like that
It's a
what he
tough
doesn't
call.
like and that he doesn't want to go anymore, right? She's like, I don't know, like there's value in both things. And I was
Yes.
like, yeah, totally. But so I'm like, let's go back to, his chart. So for example, his child's chart has a lot of Libra in it. And so I was like, the story here, I think, is a bit more around people pleasing and doing things because you feel like you should and letting your own desires kind of go aside, right? So I was like, that's kind of something that, I would offer you to look at is like, is that's it, is the lesson of like seeing everything that you've done through to the end, does that outweigh abandoning how you truly feel, right? Because the story is more there. Whereas, say,
Ah,
for example, if that kid had a lot of like Sagittarius energy and they have a hard time seeing things through, I would be like, yeah, no, this is probably somewhere where you can support them because this is a challenge, is that they have a hard time to see
to
things
learn.
through. Exactly. So that's kind of the way that I do it. So yeah, I'm always very mindful of like, yeah, projections and reframing and how I
Mhm.
present the information, but it's really more about a compass so that you know when to step in, when to step back, when to pull
Yeah.
in the resources or not, right? And to kind of prepare yourself. Like for example, my son, he has an eighth house stellium, and it's like all in like Libra. He has like third house stuff with like challenges with like school and everything. So it's like the fitting in and all of that. That brings up all of my bullying wounds from high school. I was like severely bullied in high school. So it's like I see this in his chart and I know. And I'm like, okay, I still have triggers here. I still kind of like I can preemptively do some of that so that again I'm not passing on my trauma and over exasperating his story, which is already going to be challenging around relationships and belonging and all of that.
Mhm.
So yeah, those are kind of some of
Oh, that
my thoughts
that
there.
makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And I love that example. It's a conundrum I think a lot of moms, parents find themselves in terms of like, do I let them have that? And it's great, a place to look at the chart for some insights and maybe asking certain questions of, why don't you want to do it anymore? Why aren't you doing it? Like, I hope you're not doing it because you feel you have to or you should. You don't want to, you're trying to make us happy,
Yeah.
So yeah, reframing it and getting some context to really discover why and if it's something they default to. Because I've been in that same situation where I'm like, you committed, follow through, and then you decide if you want to keep going and you make the decision. Um, but I have a lot of Pisces in my kids' chart, and so it's like, yeah, you kind of need to work on the follow through, I think, and let's just see, take it day by day, or give your child a chance to adjust to something new. Maybe they need a little bit more time before they decide they hate it. They need a little more time to get used to something. So I
Mhm.
do find the chart is very, very helpful in that way.
Yeah.
Um, there was something else I was going to ask you about that too, and it just escaped me. Oh, I know what it is. I know what it is. It came to me. So it was about the idea of when parents look at their kids' charts and they see the Chiron and the Saturn, they see these tough things. I know when they look at their charts, a lot of times it evokes fear, right?
Mm.
So you know what I mean? The fear of what it can mean. And I was one of those people who, when I saw my kids' chart and I saw their Chiron, I was like, can I nurture them in a way that softens the blow of this wound or this not exacerbated, but and I know they're on their own path to learn
Mhm.
something or their lessons or things like this, even like a Saturn retrograde in Libra, like this internalized expectation and high expectation on himself and pressure on
Mhm.
himself. Like, how can this is the wisdom of astrology, but also like the curse where moms can get really caught up in the fear and thinking that they can they heal their kid or save them from some sort of pain or anything like that? And the liberation is they are here on their own journey, and these are things that they need to learn.
Mhm.
Again, is it about us adjusting to still nurture them the best we can? Can there be any mitigation, or or do we just have to like let it happen,
Mhm.
in your
Well,
opinion?
I think it comes back to how do you personally not add to the situation by healing and dealing, right? So for
Yeah.
example, it's like I was saying, I know my son, he's North Node is in Libra, the relationships, all of that is a big thing for him. And so I don't, he already like when he has a hard time kind of making friends, feeling like he belongs, all that stuff. So it's like I don't want to add to that by just some of the comments that maybe we could make of just like, and I mean, it's like, yeah, just showing not of like some of like our like nicest parenting moments, but sometimes it's just that kind of like shame, like, well, they do something and it's like, well, of course, like, what were you expecting, right? Or like, well, if you did this, like, yeah, of course that would happen, like that type of energy, right? So I
Mhm.
try to just kind of really like not add to that, right?
Yes.
And
Okay.
really like again focus on like my own things like this and my son has definitely a lot of like father line karma, but this is something that's like big for my spouse. Like he came from a very like shame led kind of like family, right? And like where punishments and comments are very like shame led, which is interesting. I'm like, I don't know about you, but shame does not motivate me to do anything. But so that's where, and I see, and I like kind of like point it out, and I'm like, like we don't want to, that's it, be adding to some
Yeah.
of that internal dialogue that he like already has, right? And that's it, that just comes back to him having to undo his childhood conditioning and this belief and this really subconscious programming that he has to just lead with that shame-led comments, right? Of like, well, what do you expect? Or maybe if you did this, and like
Yeah.
and for another example, like my son is very much of a he's an intellect. He's very much of an old soul. Like he just wants to like talk and all that. So he's not very like sporty. But something that his dad had, he was like envisioned this like sports relationship that he would have with his son, right? And so that's something that I've had to be really like, well, no, you've got to like it's okay that there's heartbreak for you there and that you had an idea that it was going to look like and it doesn't look like. Again, to do some healing on that so that it doesn't become a projection onto our son,
Yes.
right? Like, well, if you played more sports, if you played soccer, maybe you would meet friends there, right? Blah, 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 like all those types of projections. So I
Yeah.
think that's really what it is. It's not about trying to stop all of our kids like challenges or making sure that they won't happen. But again, just looking at how are you contributing to it? Are
Yep.
you maybe allowing the grandparents to trickle that down? I know that's something that my clients will say all the time, right? They visit with their
Mhm.
in-laws, their own parents, and they're like, oh my God, like, so, are you advocating for your child to stop that generational cycle? And that's it. Where can you bring in external resources for yourself, for your kids, where you're like, this is way out of my league? Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely. Okay, it brings it right back. That was my instinct about it. I'm glad you confirmed it.
Yeah.
That bringing it full circle, it is about us. We really just have to focus on ourselves. That is not a thing that is guilt, that should be guilt led. That it's take care of yourself, do your own work, because all of that is going to help mitigate anything that could be potentially fearful you see in your kids chart, or to help free them up to really step more fully into who they are meant to be. And like you said, keep them out of therapy when they're adults,
Yeah.
right? To break the line of just having to go to therapy, right? Uh,
Yeah.
so I love that. That makes total sense. So you've affirmed a lot of things. I always love when I learn from people and it affirms what my own feelings are about my passions for the wisdom of this. I love your deeper energetic healing, work that you bring to it. I think it's such a gift. And even when I work with other astrologers or people who are trying to learn astrology, like with students, and they have gifts like this, I'm like, this isn't about you learning all this astrology. It's about really blending this beautiful gift with what you already have. And it seems like
Yeah.
that's something you've really done in a beautiful way, is taking these really beautiful gifts you have and learn to realize this is a map for just like supporting that. And yeah, I think that it sounds like you do like really meaningful, deep, beautiful work that's going to help like humanity by like one family at a time. And I
Yeah.
I get behind that too, because a lot of times I feel like, oh, there's so much, the Aquarian in me wants to like help everybody, but the Libra in me is like one on one. I really get in there with someone. I really love that. And it's going to ripple, right? The
Yeah.
ripple
Yeah.
effect.
Yeah.
So
Okay. Thank
Oh,
you.
this is a great conversation, and I think that it's going to bring a lot of great insights and wisdom and things to think about and contemplate this Cancer season. So, two things: anything that you would love to leave us with in terms of, things to keep in mind in doing this work, and then also if they want to go deeper with you, how they could connect with you and find you to maybe go deeper.
Yeah. So yeah, the one thing I want to leave behind is we have to kind of leave behind this idea that we'll ever be fully healed and like fully fixed, because this is something that I see a lot in my practice. And then like moms will come to me and they're like, I thought I dealt with this, I did already so much work on this, all of that. And it's just another way that we're being really hard on ourselves, because it's like healing is never linear, right? Like there's always going to be different things that come up, there's different layers of it. Like that's where I see with children's astrology and families astrology, maybe you are dealing kind of this one facet of the family cycle, and then your children have a different facet of it, right? And it's not because you didn't do your work, it's just a different side of it. So I
Oh,
think the quicker
great.
that we can embrace that, takes off a lot of pressure on ourselves, feeling like that's it, we always need to be fixed. It's just not linear. And I think the true measure of when you're healing and you're making progress, what I like to say to my clients is just like how quickly you can kind of turn around. Like when a lot of times when moms are in the thick of it, or that's it, they have like postpartum depression or anxiety or whatever, and they're just very much in the thick of it, it's like it can take hours or even days, right? Like something can happen and it sends you spinning off, it ruins your whole week. But when you're healing and you're doing the work, and then you realize that like, oh, I was only upset for like 2 hours, it didn't derail my whole day anymore. And that's the true measure of like your progress, right? It's just that,
Wow.
not that your things are never going to happen, but at least they don't derail you off completely, right? So I think that's a big one. It's just
Oh,
that
that's a good one.
acceptance that yeah, healing is never linear, there's no like final healed destination to arrive to. I got stuck there for a couple of years and I was just really even being really hard on myself, and now realizing that I'm like, no, I've made a lot of progress. That's it, I don't spin out for days anymore. I can use my tools and like recenter and everything. So
That's
yeah.
a beautiful barometer for us all to keep in mind, that those that are your milestones. Yes, and rewarding yourself. Look, I am working with this because I didn't get derailed the way that I normally would. Give
Mhm.
yourself that grace that, yeah, there's still parts of it that maybe you're working with or not ever done anyway, but you're
Mhm.
here and celebrate that and, commend yourself for that. Give yourself some grace.
Mhm.
Awesome. And
Exactly.
so
You're
how
not
can people
like when
work with you? Go
Yep,
ahead.
yeah. I was just gonna say that, like, when people will say that, they're like, oh, they don't want to like yell anymore or like lose their patience, and fully fair, like it's like the guilt, it's a lot. But then on the flip side is like, okay, well, did you take accountability and did you apologize and did you explain like, oh, mommy was really like I was hangry and I, whatever it was, and it's like then they say to me and they're like, oh yeah, I actually did, and I'm like, and did you ever get that as a kid? And they're like, no, never. Like there was never any acknowledgement or any apologies. So again, that's also progress, right? But it's like they're so focused on the I don't want to yell, I don't want to lose my patience, and then we
Yeah.
just don't realize that no, you are like you're repairing and you're taking accountability and you're showing your kids that it's okay to make mistakes sometimes. It's about how you show up afterwards, right? So that is also tons of progress.
You
But
can't be afraid to show your children that you're human.
yeah,
I mean, you have to, we have emotions. We're going to get angry. We're going to get upset. We almost have to learn how to argue sometimes in families, and doesn't mean we don't love each other. And it's impossible to be perfect. There's no such thing. And so you can't, say, oh, I'm never going to yell again. Like it's going to happen. It's more about how we respond, how we navigate that and work with that. I think it's a really good reminder too. And I know I have a lot of clients who like don't want to show their emotions or their struggles in front of their children because they think that's going to be negative, but really it's, hey, you're human and they're human and they're going to feel like they're not able to struggle or show emotion. So remember, the more human you are, the more open you are about even your journey and saying this is okay, the more you're kind of giving them the freedom to do the same, in my
yeah.
opinion.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love
Okay,
that.
so if people want to go deeper and really want to work with you, how can they find you?
Yeah, so my website is anniebertrand.com and I'm primarily on Instagram. It's astrology with Annie. And yeah, it would be a pleasure. I have an ancestral astrology course, which helps you really map out your child's map and like how to work with them, their manuals, so to say, but at the same time, really heal the lineage of where you came from. And so it's astrology, but it's also healing at the same time. And then I also have my one-on-one program, which is Liberate Your Family Line, where we actually go and heal all of those imprints, like I was talking about before, and rewiring that directory so that it supports you and it doesn't just act from those childhood triggers.
Beautiful, beautiful. And you can work with someone in a one-on-one a couple of times, or you can actually work with you long term. Like you just finished up some like 6 months working with people if there's, it's needed, right? So sometimes the awareness can be enough to liberate you and kind of send you on your path, and sometimes you hold their hand and walk them through a process for a longer period of time, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I looked at your course online and it looks really, really cool. And do
Yeah.
you could even like, I think astrologers who want to really do this kind of work, I always encourage them if you really want to work with families and children, like doing these kinds of programs to really learn how to bring in that wisdom and that way of approaching the chart in an ethical, beautiful way, are
Mhm.
other resources. So the average mom who doesn't know astrology might not be able to go down that rabbit hole or get all of that. They would work one-on-one. But if someone who wants to do this work, I feel like that could be a beautiful course to really help them
Mhm.
gain some wisdom. Would you look
Yeah.
at it that way as well?
Yeah, thank you for that. That's really validating. So I'm doing a beta cohort right now. I
Mhm.
have like 8 healers who have gone through my course, and then that's it. We're looking at just kind of how to add that with their healing. So I'm planning to do that specifically in the fall to train healers and astrologers in this method. Yeah. So thank you for that.
That's
That's
very cool. That's very
yeah.
cool. I love it. Well, Annie, it was so nice meeting you finally face to face like this and chatting with you and getting to know you. I hope we'll stay in touch. And,
Yeah.
there'll be other times, maybe other topics we can come together on the podcast for. I'll put your links and everything in the show notes. And, anybody who has questions about this for Annie, like drop them in the comments. We can continue it if there's any, thing you wanted us to come back and chat more deeply about. Maybe we can do that. I love to
Yeah.
get series going and gotta go down rabbit holes on these things. So thank you so much. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you so much. It was so much fun.
Thanks for listening, and I hope you gained some great astrology insight and inspiration from today's show. I'd love to hear, so drop me a comment or share in a review. Check out the show notes for all the details and links about today's episode, how you can connect with me on social or work with me directly. And don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe. Oh, and for my moms out there, be sure to join my private Conscious Parenting with Astrology Moms group on Facebook. Come join a growing community of like-minded mamas supporting each other in the hardest job in the world with the help of astrology. Hope to see you over there. Take care and keep nurturing the nature, friends. I'll see you on the next episode.